If your hostas have been getting shredded through July and August, you already know slugs are the problem. What most gardeners don't know is that mid to late summer is actually one of the hardest windows to control them, because the same warm, humid conditions that keep your hostas lush also keep slug populations at their peak for the year. The good news is that slug control isn't complicated once you understand what actually works, what's partially effective, and what's mostly a myth that keeps getting repeated online. Today I'm walking through the methods that genuinely reduce slug damage on hostas right now, including exactly where eggshells fit into the picture, because they get mentioned constantly and the truth about them is more nuanced than most videos let on. Before we start, drop your US state or growing zone in the comments and tell me how bad your slug damage is this summer. I'm curious whether this is a regional problem or something everyone's dealing with right now, and I'll read through what people are seeing. Let's get into it. Method 1. Hand picking at night, which remains the single most effective thing you can do right now. Slugs feed almost exclusively after dark, which is exactly why the damage always seems to appear overnight with no culprit in sight during the day. Head out to your hosta bed about an hour after sunset with a flashlight, and you'll find them actively feeding on the leaves in plain view. Pick them off by hand and drop them into a container of soapy water, which kills them quickly and doesn't require any chemicals. Doing this on 3 or 4 consecutive nights during an active infestation removes a meaningful portion of the local population at the exact moment they're most exposed and vulnerable. This costs nothing beyond a few minutes of your evening, and it's genuinely one of the most effective interventions available, especially when damage is heavy and you need results fast rather than waiting for a slower method to build up an effect. Method 2. Iron phosphate bait, which is the most reliable, ongoing control for established slug populations. Products containing iron phosphate, sold widely under names like Sluggo, work by disrupting the slug's digestive system after ingestion, and they're considered safe to use around children, pets, and wildlife, unlike older metaldehyde-based baits. Scatter the pellets around the base of affected hostas and across the surrounding bed, not just directly on the plant itself, since slugs travel from hiding spots nearby before they ever reach the leaves. The bait needs reapplying after heavy rain, since it breaks down in wet conditions, and consistent use through a slug season produces a noticeably smaller population over a few weeks rather than an instant fix. This is the method most extension offices and experienced hosta growers point to first for a reason. It's low effort, low risk, and it actually works when applied consistently rather than once and forgotten. Method 3. Copper barriers, which work through a genuinely interesting mechanism and are worth using on containers and raised beds specifically. Copper reacts with the slime a slug produces as it moves, creating a mild electrical sensation the slug finds unpleasant enough to avoid crossing. Copper tape wrapped around the rim of a pot or the edge of a raised bed creates a barrier the slug won't cross, and it doesn't harm the slug at all. It just turns it away. The catch is that the copper needs to stay clean and unbroken to keep working. A buildup of dirt or a gap in the tape defeats the whole barrier, and slugs will find their way around any interruption. This method is far more practical for contained spaces like pots than for an entire open garden bed, since covering a full border in copper tape gets expensive and impractical fast. If you've got prized hostas growing in containers on a patio, this is one of the cleanest, lowest maintenance solutions available. Method 4. Diatomaceous earth, which works but comes with a real limitation almost nobody mentions up front. Diatomaceous earth is a fine powder made from fossilized diatoms, and its microscopic sharp edges damage the soft underside of a slug's body as it crosses, causing it to dehydrate. Sprinkled in a continuous ring around your hostas, it genuinely deters most slugs from crossing, and it's non-toxic to birds, pets, and beneficial insects, which makes it a popular organic choice. Here's the catch. It only works while dry. The moment it gets wet from rain, dew, or irrigation, it loses its abrasive effectiveness completely, which means during a humid July or a rainy stretch, you'll be reapplying it constantly to keep the barrier working. It's also worth wearing a simple dust mask while applying it, since the fine powder can irritate your lungs if you breathe it in directly during application. This method rewards gardeners who are willing to stay on top of reapplication and works best combined with something else rather than as your only line of defense. Method 5. Eggshells. which deserve an honest answer rather than the usual oversimplified one. Eggshells get mentioned in nearly every slug control list online, and the theory is straightforward. Crushed shells create a sharp, abrasive barrier that irritates a slug's soft body the same way diatomaceous earth does. In practice, the evidence here is genuinely mixed. Some gardeners and researchers who've tested this directly report that slugs will cross a ring of crushed eggshells without much hesitation, meaning the barrier effect is far weaker in real conditions than the theory suggests. Other longtime gardeners report a modest deterrent effect, particularly when the shells are crushed fine and applied thickly. The honest conclusion is that eggshells alone are not a reliable standalone solution, but they're not useless either. They're a free, easy way to add a bit of extra abrasive texture to a barrier, especially when combined with diatomaceous earth or crushed sand in the same ring around your hostas. If you're already collecting eggshells from cooking, crushing them finely and adding them to your existing barrier costs nothing and can't hurt. But don't rely on eggshells by themselves to solve a serious infestation, because for most gardeners, they won't. Method 6. Beer traps, which work to a real but limited degree and need consistent maintenance to matter. Bury a shallow container like a tuna can or a small cup so its rim sits flush with the soil surface, and fill it with beer. Slugs are drawn to the yeasty scent, crawl in, and drown. This method does catch slugs, but multiple field comparisons have found it less effective than gardeners often expect, partly because the trap only pulls in slugs from a fairly limited radius around it, and partly because it needs replacing every couple of days once the beer goes flat or gets diluted by rain. If you use this method, place several traps spaced through the bed rather than relying on just one, and treat it as a supplemental tool alongside handpicking or bait rather than your primary strategy. Method 7. Reduce moisture and hiding spots, which addresses the actual conditions creating your slug problem in the first place. Slugs need cool, damp, dark places to hide during the day, and a garden bed full of thick mulch piled against plant crowns, boards, decorative rocks, or dense low growth gives them exactly that. Pull mulch back a few inches from the base of your hostas, remove any boards or loose debris sitting directly on the soil, and water your hostas in the morning at the base of the plant rather than in the evening or overhead. Evening watering leaves foliage wet through the night, which is precisely when slugs are most active and most comfortable. This is a slower fix than handpicking or bait, but it reduces the population's ability to establish itself in your garden in the first place, which pays off over the following weeks and months rather than just tonight. Method 8. Choose slug-resistant hosta varieties for new plantings, which is the long-term fix almost nobody thinks about until they've lost a favorite plant. Slugs strongly prefer thin, tender-leaved hosta varieties over thick, heavily textured corrugated ones. Varieties like Sum and Substance, Empress Wu, and Halcyon are noticeably more resistant to slug damage than thin-leaved types like Lancifolia, simply because the leaf tissue is tougher to chew through. This won't help the hostas already struggling in your garden right now, but if you're planning new additions or replacing a hosta that gets destroyed every single year, choosing a thicker-leaved variety solves a large part of the problem before it starts. Putting this together for July and August specifically, start with handpicking tonight if damage is active and severe, since it's the fastest way to see real results. Add iron phosphate bait around the base of affected plants for ongoing control that keeps working while you sleep. If you're growing hostas in containers, add copper tape for a clean, low-maintenance barrier. For garden beds, a ring of diatomaceous earth reapplied after rain, optionally reinforced with crushed eggshells for a bit of added abrasive texture, adds another layer of defense. Pull mulch back from the crowns, water in the morning instead of the evening, and clear away boards or debris that give slugs somewhere to hide during the day. None of these methods eliminates slugs completely and permanently. That's not realistic in a shaded, moist garden, but combining several of them consistently through the worst months of the season keeps the damage manageable and your hostas looking the way they're supposed to. If this actually gave you a clearer picture of what's worth your time and what isn't, do me a favor and share it with another gardener dealing with the same shredded leaves this summer. That helps more than almost anything else. And before you go, tell me in the comments which of these methods you've already tried, and whether it actually worked for you. I'm genuinely curious what's holding up in real gardens versus what just sounds good in theory. Now go grab a flashlight tonight and see exactly what you're dealing with.